Hey guys, it's Nikes, and with Avengers Doomsday releasing in theaters this December, it only feels natural that this year I do a MCU marathon. But of course, I thought if I'm gonna watch all these films, I may as well also talk about all these films. So welcome to the first part of my complete MCU retrospective, where today we're obviously focusing on Phase 1. Also, as you can see, things look a little bit different as I'm no longer just a disembodied voice. You actually have a face to associate with my voice, so I'm gonna start incorporating some live action elements into this channel, mainly just like actually filming myself when I'm talking, and so I'm slowly converting my living room into being a set for these videos. Of course, my living room did act as a set for videos on my old channel, so this isn't anything new, but with the focus on this new channel, I'm also starting to kind of change things around a bit. This back wall is still a work in progress. Obviously, there's going to be more than just this one Spider-Man poster. I actually have some smaller art posters kind of decorating the top, which I like how they look, but when I'm framing the shot like this, you can't see any more than Iron Fist's body and Black Panther's crotch. That's very nice. So the set is a work in progress. I'm working on getting some more posters and other things to kind of decorate the set behind me. Stay with me as I'm kind of decorating the set, but I thought having a physical set would make these videos a little more interesting than just being my disembodied voice. Anyways, onto the focus of this video. I'm of course going to be talking about my opinions on the 6 films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 1. And of course, it all began with Iron Man back in 2008. I'm going to be holding up the DVDs. Do you remember DVDs? Of course you do, but... So yeah, Iron Man, this was the movie that started it all. This is the movie that transformed Iron Man from a B-tier comic character to just one of the biggest superheroes in general. It also made Robert Downey Jr. one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, and it's a decent film. I'll tell you this, Iron Man has never been my favorite Marvel character, and this movie has never been one of my favorite Marvel movies. If I'm being completely honest, when I was a kid, I thought this movie was fucking boring, which may seem blasphemic to say, but when you take out the parts where he's actually being Iron Man, it's just a lot of talking, which now that I'm older, like, I definitely appreciate that a lot more. But I just remember as a kid, I barely watched this movie because I'm just like, it's just boring. Of course, now I can appreciate the story elements, and I do like Tony and his arc in this movie. But at its core, I still kind of retain the sentiment that, like, it's not too interesting of a movie, honestly. Tony is really, like, the only interesting character in this. Even Rhodes, he isn't really that interesting in this movie. The Iron Man stuff is kind of cool, but, like... And then the villain Obadiah Stane, like, I mean, he's alright, but, like, ultimately what it comes down to is he's Ironmonger, a bigger evil Iron Man. And of course, the most interesting supervillains are the ones that are just a character with the same powers of the hero, but they're evil. Yeah, you know, Iron Man, it isn't a bad movie. I definitely appreciate this movie for what it did, the groundwork it laid for the MCU, and it showed potential of what superhero movies could be if they actually, you know, took them seriously, made them a little more grounded. So it's not a bad film, but it's never been one of my favorites. It still is one that kind of bores me, and honestly, I could go the rest of my life without watching this, and I really wouldn't be that upset. Next up, we have The Incredible Hulk, which I know I had a DVD of as a kid, but I haven't been able to find that DVD in, like, 7 years or so. But yeah, The Incredible Hulk, another movie that as a kid bored the shit out of me, and now that I'm older, it's still kind of boring, honestly. It almost just feels like there isn't really a lot to say, as it's just Bruce Banner on the run from the government. I talked about this in my worst MCU romances video, but there's a very whatever relationship with Betty Ross, which is really funny in retrospect because, like, she doesn't appear in the MCU again until Captain America Brave New World. So it's just an incredibly forgettable relationship, an incredibly forgettable movie. To me, this movie's entire legacy is the fact that it was, like, pretty much irrelevant to the wider MCU until Brave New World was all of a sudden like, okay, we're gonna follow up all these things from this movie, which was really weird. Because, of course, a very notorious thing about this movie is that Ed Norton played Hulk in this movie, but by Avengers, Mark Ruffalo replaced him as Hulk's actor. So outside of William Hurt and Robert Downey Jr.'s cameo at the end, this really doesn't even feel like an MCU movie because it feels like it's been completely forgotten by the MCU. At least that's how it felt like for this movie's, you know, first 15 years of existence. And to this day, it still is the only standalone Hulk film in the MCU, and it's just so forgettable. I don't even have much to say about the movie because it's just so boring. Who the hell cares? Just a whatever, nothing movie. Next up, we got Iron Man 2, or as I like to call it, Avengers .5. That's basically what this movie feels like. It feels like it's just Avengers setup because it introduces Black Widow, it shows Nick Fury a lot more, you see Agent Coulson, there's references to Captain America, of course there's Mjolnir in the post-credit scene. This movie really just felt like a stepping stone to really set up the Avengers, with Iron Man as the focus. Of course, this movie is a very half-assed adaptation of Demon in a Bottle, which is like... But obviously they didn't want to go as far as the comic did, because you don't really want to represent your golden boy as a struggling alcoholic, which I get that. But like, for such a serious storyline like that, you really have to go all in, or else it's just kind of like, why are we trying to adapt the storyline to begin with? With that being said though, I do have a soft spot for Iron Man 2. This movie isn't great, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot of fun. I think when it comes down to just being an action flick with Iron Man, while there isn't a lot of action like the first one, and as a kid I did find a lot of this movie boring, there still are some really fun set pieces. Like I always loved the racetrack scene. The final battle I also really liked at the Stark Expo, where Tony and Rhodey are fighting all of the robots, and then also Black Widow breaking into that compound. Overall, I do find this movie more entertaining than the first Iron Man, but I also do think the first Iron Man is an objectively better film. But when it comes to like my personal enjoyment, I'd rather watch this one any day of the week. I'm still not like head over heels for it. Again, I really don't care for Iron Man as a character, and like this movie doesn't really help with that. And as I started off this entry with, this movie really is mostly just like a stepping stone to Avengers. But you know, it's still fine. Next up, we have Thor, a movie that I have an incredibly soft spot for. Like the other movies so far, this one also bored the shit out of me when I was a kid, but around the time Infinity War was coming out back in 2018, I rewatched this movie in preparation for Infinity War, and I honestly enjoyed it a good amount, and I still enjoy it to this day. I really like the first half hour or so, where it's just, you know, Thor being Thor, and once he gets banished to Earth, it does get a little slow and a little less entertaining, but I still enjoy the story of him being on Earth, him being a fish out of water, and this god who's just so used to being this great grandiose figure who's above everyone, and he learns humanity and humility. And there's that really great moment where the destroyer gets sent to Earth and Thor stands up against it with no powers and just, you know, gets his shit handed to him. But of course, that's what helps him get his power back, and I think that's just a really great moment that shows his progress as a character, because at the beginning of the film, at his coronation, he's, you know, this really egotistical, high and mighty, proud god. And by the end of the film, even though he has no powers, he still stands up for people, showing that he has, you know, learned and grown throughout the film. So I found it to be an interesting, entertaining, you know, Thor story. It's still not like an amazing film, but it's a guilty pleasure movie of mine, one that I've definitely enjoyed for a good bit now. Next up, we have Captain America, the First Avenger, which I've always loved this movie. Ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated with World War II, so to have a superhero movie set during that time was really cool. And I just like this movie, man. Captain America, he's such a likable guy. Chris Evans plays him perfectly. He's inherently a boring character since he doesn't really have, you know, too many flaws. From the beginning, he's willing to sacrifice himself for others, but ultimately his sacrifice of crashing the plane into the Arctic, which causes him to sleep for 70 years and wake up in the modern day, that ends up making him a more interesting character since it makes him a man out of his time, which of course helps him become a more interesting character throughout the rest of the MCU. But of course, back to this movie, I won't say he's an incredibly interesting character in this movie, but I think the rest of the movie around him is entertaining enough to really hold my attention. And yeah, it's just a really fun, solid MCU flick, and just a really great introduction to Captain America. And because of this movie, he's always been my favorite superhero in the MCU, so of course I'm gonna love this movie and the rest of his movies, which of course we're gonna talk about in the future. But to round out phase 1, we have The Avengers. This movie was just mind-blowing as a kid to see all these heroes come together and fight alongside each other to stop an alien invasion. Like that was just really damn cool as a kid. Flash forward nearly 14 years later, god, I really hate saying that, and I still think this film is like pretty damn good. The best part about this film is the team's dynamic and the way that we see them grow and evolve throughout the film. Of course, as the teams meeting each other, there's a tension between all of them. They all come from completely different backgrounds, so their way of handling things and their personalities in general are so different from each other, it's of course naturally gonna lead to them disagreeing. So this film is just about them learning to work together, and even though they are completely different people, they can still work together to, you know, save the world. And beyond that, it's just a really fun, simple, entertaining Avengers flick. It just feels like the perfect introduction of this team, and it was the perfect culmination of everything that came before. I love this movie. To this day, it still is one of my favorite MCU movies, so I've always had a soft spot for this one. So with that, let's talk about why did phase 1 of the MCU work? Especially considering the fact that I was pretty harsh about half these these movies. Even though the qualities of the movies themselves was definitely very mixed, there was one thing each of these movies did really well, and that was introducing these characters and establishing who they are. As I mentioned when I was talking about Avengers, they all come from completely different backgrounds. Iron Man is a rich boy weapons manufacturer, Hulk is a scientist who had an experiment go wrong, Thor is a literal god, and Captain America is a soldier from World War II. They all came from completely different places, and because of that are completely different characters. So when they come together in Avengers, it's interesting to see how these characters learn to work together despite their different backgrounds. And by the time you get to Avengers, you care about all these characters, and so it's actually interesting seeing them learn to get along and learn to work together. And so when you reach the climax of the film where they're all working together to protect New York, it feels like an earned moment, what this universe had been building to for the past 4 years. So even though my feelings on these films are incredibly mixed, I still think Phase 1 was a really great introduction to the MCU. It was the perfect execution of a shared cinematic universe like this. It took time to establish all of the characters, so then by the time you bring them together for the ensemble film, they don't have to waste time introducing who these characters are. Instead, they can immediately go into how do these characters interact with each other? How are they going to end up saving the world together? And of course, throughout the late 2000s, early 2010s, whenever these films were coming out, this was something that, really hadn't been attempted before, a shared cinematic universe of superheroes. It was ambitious and something that many companies have since tried in many ways, but of course, have never succeeded in. But when you actually look at Phase 1 of the MCU, it's easy to see why that succeeded and a lot of the other attempts didn't. Hope you guys enjoyed my Phase 1 MCU retrospective. Of course, soon enough, I'll do a Phase 2 retrospective, of course, followed by 3, 4, 5, and probably not 6 before Doomsday, but I'm gonna do retrospectives of the rest of the MCU, of course. And this will all culminate to one final video before Doomsday where I rank every MCU project leading up to Doomsday, so I've got some big stuff in the works here. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and have a great day.